Roker Park, December 26, 1963, and the playing career of Brian Clough, the fastest goal scorer in British football, is virtually over. This week we welcome Brian Clough to Leeds in his new job, manager of Leeds United, successor to Don Revie, and a man in charge of the Leeds machine, the most successful combination in British football. So how will his outspoken personality fit in with Leeds, and what can he do for a team that's done just about everything? What will his strategy be? To put these questions to Brian Clough, I've got with me three sporting journalists, but I'm going to kick off with the very first question. Brian Clough, you've called Norman Bite-Your-Legs Hunter. You've said that Peter Lorimer falls when no one's touched him.
I took Norman Bite-Your-Legs Hunter from a sign in the World Cup build-up.
Well, you're even quoted as calling Bremner a con man. So how did you get on with them at your first meeting as manager?
I got on remarkably well with them. The last one is not true. I've never called Billy a con man at all. But Norman Bite-Your-Legs Hunter, that's a beautiful... If you've ever seen a preamble to a sports programme, somebody holds this up in a banner to a cup final. And it's a beautiful shot.
Was there no ill feeling at all?
And he does bite the legs.
Was there no ill feeling?
Of course not, no. I think he's quite proud of the fact that he's regarded as a hard man.
OK, well, let me ask you also, what made you want the job as Leeds manager in the first place? Because after all, they've won just about everything except the European Cup. You can't add much new glory and you face the possibility of going downhill. So why take the risk of coming to Leeds?
I don't think it's a risk at all. I wanted the job. There was that many questions there in one. It was unbelievable.
Well, it's why you want the job, essentially.
Good lad. I want the job because they're a top club, if not the top club. And I want to be a manager of the top club.
Well, John Sadler of The Sun, your first question.
Fine, you've got the job, Brian. You are now manager of the top club. You've inherited a Revie setup, backroom boys, players. Some people call them an ageing side. Some might even say they're over the top. How on earth do you start and tackle a job of this magnitude?
Just by the normal procedure I've had right since I came into management. Talking to them, listening to their point of view, giving my point of view, adding a little bit of me here and there, and incorporating everything that's good at Leeds and putting a little bit of me into it.
Keith Macklin, your first question.
Brian, the criticism that you've launched at Leeds over the years has been quoted.
And it's been right.
Fine. You also said, I think, in a newspaper article that the Football Association should have fined them infinitely more than £3,000 and possibly considered putting them down into Division 2.
I think Leeds have always sold themselves short, Keith. I think they've been champions and they've not been good champions in the sense of wearing the crown remarkably well. I think they could have been a little bit more loved. You know, there are a lot of people jealous of people who are successful, but having said that, apart from that, Leeds were disliked and are disliked. And it's only been the last 12 months where they've started to earn, you know, a little bit of applause from everybody. I want them to be good league champions.
Fine. Can I put the second half of my question, Austin, please? Why did you show such alacrity to join them after such vituperative criticism of them over the years?
Lo, mate, it'd take me half an hour to explain those two words for a start. As I've already said, they are a top club. When the job's offered to you of a top club, then obviously it's got to be considered. You want to get there, you want to get on with it, you want to be associated with the best in your profession. You want to be associated personally with the best producer, the best everything in your profession. I want to be associated with the best players and the best club. And Leeds are just that.
That's why it's got me as chairman. Peter Cooper of the Daily Mirror.
Brian, how anxious are you to have Leeds United liked?
I'm so anxious and I'd be prepared to finish second instead of first.
But on league positions, if I may, Austin, Leeds have never finished a season below fourth. You pretended the other day that you weren't aware of this. I'm sure you were. How do you live now and perhaps during the season with the thought that people are going to say, if this fella Clough finishes fifth with Leeds, he has not done as well as Don Revie?
I've never thought of finishing anywhere for a start, but that obviously is an inevitable thing that will arise. But I would prefer you not to, you know, prejudge 9 months. Come and ask me that when I've finished fifth. I think that's a fair answer to a question, you know, which is a little bit hypothetical.
But how much does it nag you, the thought that
it doesn't nag me
people
at all.
are mindful of this fourth position?
Well, I don't know whether they are mindful, Peter, to be very fair, and it hasn't nagged me that much because I've honestly never, ever thought of it. If I thought that Bremner and Co. could finish or will finish fifth, we would have talked about it this morning. But I don't think they will, and I believe they can win something next season and win it very well.
Brian, you've been called big-headed, arrogant, brash, the lot.
By your profession, John,
Yeah,
yes.
sure. A lot of it right, too.
And a lot of it wrong.
Fine, I'll concede that. What kind of manager have Leeds hired? How would you define your approach to management, apart from being brilliant?
Good lad. Well, thank you for the compliment. It's very, very difficult when you get asked a question like that. What I want to bring into Leeds, because apparently, by all intents and purposes, they've got everything else there. They have a highly successful team, reputed to have the best back room in the country, reputed to have a stadium which I believe is the best. I'm going to bring a bit of warmth and a little bit more honesty and a little bit more of me into the setup, I hope.
Does that suggest, if I might butt in, John, does that suggest that warmth and honesty have been missing in
Well,
your opinion?
it certainly suggests a little bit warmth has been missing, and I want this to be incorporated in the Leeds setup, and I want people to realise it and accept it, that they're not machines at Leeds, that they're human beings, etc, etc, etc. This machine type of operation that's got across for so many years doesn't do the lads compliment. It doesn't pay them a compliment, honestly.
As people, as
As
personalities.
people. They're very sensitive players, I'm certain. They worry about the professions, and they can still win, as I repeat, they can still win and win well.
Sensitive players, Brian, very good players, successful players. Players who are getting old. I've not gone through the lot, but you've got quite a few in the first team squad who are 30 or above. How much does this worry you?
John, now everybody's faced in life with getting old, obviously, but footballers, it's more acute. It worries me to the extent that I don't know when Norman Hunter finishes playing, or Billy Bremner finishes playing, or Johnny Giles finishes playing in 5 years' time, how the hell I'm going to replace them. I just do not know. I don't know where the players are in this country to replace that type of player.
Isn't this frightening?
It is a little bit frightening, but every other manager in the game is faced with the same problem.
Not on the same scale, or in the same circumstances
Not
as
on
you
the
right
same
now.
scale regarding numbers, and not the fact that I have got to do better than winning the First Division Championship. But, you know, that's perhaps why Leeds got me.
Brian, on that, I'm sorry to spoil the big finish. On that point, the business of players coming up, we've heard a lot about the depth at Leeds United.
Yes. Regarding players?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there depth here, or have you perhaps not been here long enough to work out whether there is or not?
I'm certain there is depth, but he's had a problem over 13 years, or 12 or 11, whatever it is, of keeping a set side. He's tried to incorporate other players and have a pool, but it is impossible to have 16 great players. Nobody was ever going to replace Billy Bremner, for example. So how could you keep another Billy Bremner happy? You couldn't. Nobody was ever going to replace 3 or 4 or 5 of them. So it was a waste of time trying to do it, in one sense of the word, but it should have been attempted. I'm certain it has been. As I say, I will quote your words and of all your colleagues, Leeds have the best backroom setup in the whole Football League, and I'm certain they've earned every penny that they've had in the last 10 years.
If this is true, Brian, then the replacements, presumably, are already there. The youngsters, have you seen them?
I've watched about half an hour of youngsters so far. I've been
Have
there
you seen them?
2.5 days.
Brian, can I ask you a question I did ask at a press conference on Wednesday, so it may well have been appeared in newspapers. But you come to a team which has been regarded as Manchester United were the Busby Babes, this team were the Reevy Babes.
Yes.
He was regarded as a father figure, or to change sexes, a mother hen with his chicks. These have been quoted.
Yes.
Now, you come to these players and you're, forgive me, the outsider who's come in and taken over from the father figure. Don't you expect some degree of resentment to this, some degree of perhaps not quite getting on for the first week or so?
I would accept and expect a strangeness, as there was a strangeness there. As I discussed with them this morning, I was I felt I was more wary of Leeds players when I walked in on Wednesday morning than they were wary of me. It's a natural reaction to somebody who comes in new, having followed Revy. It's perfectly normal. If you meet anybody for the first time, never mind football clubs, you have this reaction. And it's a case of understanding, it's a case of working together, and it's a case of trust that will replace this reaction.
But isn't this going to be a very long-term process? After all, Derby were your team, you built them up, they were your sons in a sense. Now you come into a team which has already established itself and they're stepsons. The relationship is going to be completely different for a long time.
I don't think it will take them long to realise that I'm a very, very, very honest manager. I think they will have realised that already. And once having a basis of that understanding, the fact that I am honest and they are talented, then that has started already.
But again, this is a difference, because Leeds have been in some ways a cosseted team, whereas you've been outspoken in criticising some of your players.
That was discussed this morning, Austin. Well, that came up. That was discussed about how I would react or how they would react to me criticising them publicly.
What was the answer?
There was no answer, final conclusion come to. The fact that, you know, this is one of the things that I do, and not as much as people make out in actual fact, but it's one of the things I do, and it's one of the things they'll have to live with until we reach an understanding on this type of thing. I will have to live with all their little bits and bobs until we work it all out, and I positively refuse to play bingo.
Well, let's move on to your partner in crime in the past, Peter Taylor. What was the relationship between the two of you? What did he contribute to the partnership?
He contributed sometimes 75%, sometimes a little bit less. His speciality was the ability to assess a player quicker and better than anybody else in football.
Well, did Leeds want him to come with you?
Leeds wanted me, and they wanted me with anybody else I care to bring along.
See, the point I'm wondering is how your style is going to change, your management style is going to change now that you're no longer with...
Oh, I couldn't change that style. That was my style. My style wasn't affected by Peter at all in that sense of the word, and my style won't change at all.
Not even in little things, Brian.
Such
affected, you know, where you wanted a second opinion, needed a second opinion. He was your right-hand man.
Well, that's not connected with style, Peter. You know, my style of management is there. It's there for everybody to see. If I commit crimes in football, and I'm certain I do, I commit crimes by trusting people and bearing everything on my sleeve or my shirt and bringing everything out into the open.
But suddenly you're here, as Austin says, without Peter Taylor.
Creates problems.
Without Peter Taylor,
Yes.
with an element of, not exactly friction, but a certain amount of natural resentment.
I've had a
do you feel
two-hour
you're
chat.
cast adrift? Do you
I've
feel
had
you're
a
on
two-hour chat with Maurice Lindley, with Sid Owen, with Cyril Partridge, with the physiotherapist this afternoon, and with Tony Collins. We've had a 2-hour chat. Now, to be cut adrift from Peter was a blow, but having walked into that setup, by hell, it's been softened.
Well, some of the argument was, you see, that he contributed an element of stability, a kind of baseline, to the more mercurial Clough temperament. I would say you don't understand the words.
I would say that was fair comment. You know, I came into management how long ago now? Nearly 9-10 years ago. And I would say that was fair comment at the time. But, you know, I have reasonably matured, I hope. I have got a little bit more sense as I'm approaching, you know, middle age and that type of thing. If I hadn't, then I'd be a complete idiot.
John Sadler.
We've talked about Peter Taylor as offering a second opinion, Brian. As far as assessment of players was concerned, his was a first opinion, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
How good is your assessment of players then?
It's not bad. It's not bad. It's pretty good.
Are you going to have to use it more now, you're without Peter?
It'll depend on how good the assessment of the people at Leeds employ. Obviously, if there are cases where I don't think they're quite right, then I'll be called on to do something. But there's no evidence of that yet, John.
Can you give us any evidence of the kind of player you've gone out and seen and said, yes, we'll pay X thousand quid, he's ours, and you've bought him?
Me personally, on my own, Colin Todd.
It's not bad for starters, is it?
Peter never ever saw Colin Todd play. Never ever in his whole life until I took him to Derby.
But he usually confirmed your judgment, that was the relationship.
He initially did all the work. He was the one that got the 90%. But John asked me for a specific case. I thought I'd drop Colin Todd in.
Not bad.
Well, not too
well,
bad.
there, we'll take the commercial break, which will be back in just a few minutes with Brian Clough. See you then. Welcome back to our meeting with Brian Clough, and I'm going to take the chairman's prerogative again and put the first question in this half of the programme. Brian Clough, a couple of seasons back when Leeds and Derby were competing very closely, we saw two very contrasting styles of play, the attacking style of Derby and what you called the Leeds machine. Now, the big problem facing us in Leeds is who's going to change now, the style of play of Leeds, the Leeds machine, or Brian Clough's style?
I'm going to incorporate a little bit of me into their machine. And it doesn't want oiling because it runs remarkably well, but it just wants a little bit dropping in. You know, the last drop, the last bit of the cake, so to speak. The almonds on the top. Now I can't do better than winning the league because Revy won it last year. But as I've said already, I perhaps can win it a little bit better with a bit of luck.
John Sadler.
Discipline's always been a favourite topic of yours, Brian, and you exercised a fair amount of control at Derby. You fined players for silly things, getting booked for kicking the ball away, mouthing at the referee, this kind of thing.
Yes.
Leeds have a reputation of being a hard side, at times an indisciplined side, by some people a dirty side. What do you aim to do about this here?
I think they've sold themselves short.
In what way?
I think they've sold themselves short by delving into this type of thing when they were the best team in any case. I think they've sold themselves short as men and as players. They are so talented and they're so good at their jobs and they're so much professionals that they could have come above all that and won quite comfortably without having been labelled with these type of things. And they did earn the labels, be under no, you know, absolutely it was right what people were saying in the sense that they were disliked and they were niggling and messing about and all that type of thing. And they could have won it quite easily, John, without that.
So how are you going to stamp it out, if I can interrupt?
Well, we're just going to interpret it a little bit different. You know, it's just a little turn here and a little turn there. Billy, when he gets whacked for a start, little Billy doesn't wear pads. And I'm certain from there to there is absolutely black and blue. And when he gets kicked, it hurts. And he shows he hurts and he gets up and perhaps gestures a couple of times and all this type of thing. You know, we'll try and cut it down a little bit.
Does that mean tougher control? You make it sound very gentle. Are you going to be tougher?
It's not a case of being tougher, it's a case of explaining the other side of the coin to Billy, telling him how I work, asking him what does he think about it, and then putting it into action.
Brian, can I ask you to define this a little more closely? The area of... Are you talking about dissent or dirty play?
No, I was talking about everything. I was talking about
what
dissent.
was worse? The Leeds that you saw on television occasionally when they played Derby, where was the worst sphere? Dissent or dirty play?
I would say it was dissent.
Yes.
And the original question was one of flair and one of machine, you know. Derby did play with a bit of abandon. We did excite, and when we won the championship, people were pleased. I've said to Billy this morning, I said to all the lads, despite the fact you are undisputed champions throughout the whole country, people are still begrudging you it.
Well, don't you think the first half of last season, when they built up this 11 points lead,
yes,
and they beat Tottenham Hotspur 3-0 at White Hart Lane, Arsenal 2-1 at Highbury, they played quite brilliant stuff.
Held my hands up and told them that they started last season and recuperating some of the lost ground, but you know, it's taken them 10 years. They've sold themselves short for 10 years, and that's a tragedy. That is a player's career.
Peter Cooper.
Yes, Brian, among the things you can win, or at least the one thing you can win to go better than Don Revie, at least on the record book, is the European Cup, and you've got that to do, in effect, this season, or at least a run at it. What's your feeling about the cynics who might say, well, all right, if Leeds win it, they could still turn round, the cynics, that is, and say, well, that wasn't Brian Clough, that was the team that was already there.
Yeah, it's perfectly true, they will do that. That's why on certain aspects of me taking over at Leeds, I can't win. Because if I finish fifth, as you were suggesting earlier on, Pete, I'm going to get stick. If I win it, then they're going to say it was Revie's side in any case. So on that particular angle, I just can't win, and I don't attempt to.
How much do you feel like a man over a barrel?
Today, when I've been discussing contracts, because Mr. Revie, or Don, or Revie, or the England team manager, whoever, you know, whatever name you want to put to him, left a lot of people with the contracts not signed. And we've had a lot of discussions today, and a lot of hard work, and I felt today slightly over a barrel. But with a bit of sense, a bit of good judgment, and a bit of give and take, we'll solve it all.
What does that mean? It'll be a long time before we see the impress of your personality.
No, it doesn't mean that at all. It meant that I've had a few problems today, and perhaps I felt that they could have been resolved long before I came, because nobody knew I was coming. So they could have been resolved and set up for a new manager.
John Sadler.
Leeds have been riddled over the years during the Revie career at Elland Road, Brian, with superstitions and doubts and fears. This is my opinion. I've always felt that they've played inhibited football to a certain extent. Do you share it? Are you likely to work on the removal of these
No, I don't share
inhibitions?
superstition at all. I don't flaunt it, as I don't flaunt any
Will you try and
that
remove
type
it?
of thing. I will attempt to remove it completely by the fact that I don't believe in it.
Isn't
And
that
that's
rather-
the only way you can remove it.
Haven't you had the impression that over the years and from time to time, when they've got towards a cup final or towards a league
Yes,
title, they've not quite gone out and played their own football?
Exactly, they've been a little bit restricted. I had great fears of that bloody suit of his in the office when I walked in. You know, the one he's had 13 years. I thought, if that's there, that's going straight in the bin, because not only will it be old, it'll smell. You know, if you have a suit for 13 years.
Well, it's
I
not,
had great
it's not only a
fears of
question of
this.
superstition, is it? It's a question of finishing power. Whereas, in sight of goals, Leeds have sort of faltered. Now, what can you inject there?
Don't sell them short, Austin.
How can you give them faith in themselves so they don't falter?
You're talking about my club.
Yes.
And they have been the most successful club right throughout the country. What was your question again?
But they've won the Championship twice in 10 years of
Yes.
top-class football. Now, why this faltering at the last minute? What can you inject to give them staying power?
Well, we'll remove what John was talking about. They have the staying power. They have the staying power physically. I believe they have it mentally. It's just a case of pointing them in the right direction. They've finished second about 4 times. I believe with a little bit, as I've said, just a fraction of change of direction, they could have won it 4 times and finished second twice. I must repeat this type of thing. I think they've been selling themselves short.
Keith Macklin.
Yeah, Brian, following that up, it has been felt by some people that Leeds, for instance, have gone into, say, a 1-0 lead with 20 minutes to go.
Yes.
They've pulled men back and
Closed it up.
Closed it up.
Yeah.
Would your policy be go forward and get another one and make sure?
Not literally that, but, you know, not perhaps as it sounds, you know, gear abandon, get up to the other end and stick one in. But I do say that when you are employing people like Reaney, Queen, you can't tell me that they're the greatest defenders in the world and then not trust them to defend. And this is what I think Don didn't do. As you've said, when it was 1-up, they pulled everybody back to protect Norman Hunter. He's the least of the people that wants protection, and the goalkeeper and the 2 full-backs. They've had the best players in the world. I believe they should have gone and shoved forward and sewn it up completely with 2 or 3. I believe they were good enough, and I believe that they'd sold themselves short.
And can we expect the Leeds United side under your banner, when they're 1-0 up, not to spend the last 20 minutes protecting a 1-goal lead?
You can definitely, without any shadow of a doubt, expect that. We will not protect, as such, a 1-goal lead. Entirely devote our game to doing that. That is not on at all. I think it is bad football. I do, honestly. Not so much how it appears or how the spectator reacts. I do think it is rank, bad tactics.
Peter Cooper.
On that point, Brian, talking about tactics, you said on your first day that there would be a certain amount of spying, finding out about the opposition, but you added, with some stress, I think, not as much as it has been done here. Do you think there has been an overfeeding of data about the opposition that's perhaps weighed the players down?
I'm not so sure about that. There's been an overreaction to this type of thing, in the sense that the only thing they produced about Leeds was the fact that they had everybody covered and they did this and they did that, right to the last minute detail. I think that's been overplayed.
Did that inhibit the players, possibly?
I'm not sure, but the fact that it was done, and done to a large extent, I think it's been overplayed. Because if it's been done for 10 years, we must know every single player that many times and watched him. Players that have played, players who have gone and played, and players who have not even been conceived yet. We must even have a file on that lot, if I'm to believe everything.
On that point briefly, Keith, if I may, you seem to have a flair for disappearing, or at least slipping off, at a time of tension. You came here from your holiday, you clinched the job, then you went back on holiday. Is that a conscientious ploy? Do you do that on purpose?
Oh, no, not at all. I'd booked a holiday with my wife and 3 children. I don't see them that much. I'm absolutely obsessed with them. They're the only thing I'm in football for, apart from loving the game a little bit. And the fact that I'd taken them away and booked it and done this, that and the other, I didn't care whether Leeds, Liverpool, England or anybody came up. I was going to finish my holiday.
But on that, have you ever taken a day off at some crucial stage of the season when the players are right up against the collar, worrying about this and that? Have you ever systematically taken a day off to give this impression that, well,
Players
the boss isn't worrying, why should we?
Players, oh, no. And I've never, ever, ever managed players who I've left worrying.
But you have appeared very frequently on television, haven't you? Which
Yes.
caused conflict at Derby.
Don't knock it, I'm on with you, Austin.
Yes, you are, which is very pleasant. Are you under any restraints or restrictions as to appearances on television commentary jobs?
None
under your new job
whatsoever.
at Leeds?
No, none whatsoever. This became a bit of an issue when I was at Derby. Sam Longson was, you know, chuntering on and saying it could be detracting me from my job
Well,
and
it
all
could,
this
couldn't
type of
it?
thing. It could if it was done to, you know, a large extent. But I was doing no more last year or the year before than I was doing 5 years ago, and he used to loan me his car to go in those days.
You don't see a potential for conflict with the directors and perhaps detraction from your duty with the team?
Not at all, because I am selling Leeds United every time I appear, either on television or when I talk on radio, and I even talk to this lot, if you forgive the expression.
Are you
I'm selling Leeds.
Leeds or Brian
OK,
Clough?
well, gentlemen, like the cunning chairman that I am, I've got myself the last word. We wish you, Brian, and Leeds United every success, and from all of us here, it's good night.